Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast that will never ever be uttered by me, because I don't believe in naming things, especially bad names that should be forgotten and buried. With me on this nameless podcast. No, we're not doing that. No, I'm not falling for your trick. With me is Josh.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Say ludonarrative dissonance.
And also with me is Alex.
Hello.
We are here to talk about the video games and the things. Starting with...
Is that what this is about?
Supposedly. I mean, last week was a Halloween special. We didn't do a lot of video games. It was mostly sort of a vloggy video. This is going to be more video game focused. We're gonna really hammer home the...
In the middle of a Halloween party, as I recall.
Yes. Speaking of video gamey stuff, Alex, you were watching the Battle of Eidolon Warframe Twitch drop streamy thing? Would you like to explain what that is?
Yeah, so Warframe came out with a recent update, Plains of Eidolon. I know, it doesn't really matter. And it's a new map that is, air quotes, open world, and they marketed the hell out of this thing. They had advertisements in Times Square. They went to town on this, and we had a little bit of insight to this because I am a Warframe streaming partner, so they actually had me sign an NDA and all this stuff. It was very crazy. So what they decided to do is, because Twitch drops is a new thing, and it's a new system that allows you to integrate gameplay with streaming, and you can do different things with Twitch drops, or Twitch apps is like the larger body, so you can like do things like show your inventory in the game on stream, things like all sorts of different ways you connect it. But basically the deal was that for Warframe, every time a streamer got an achievement in the game, anyone who was watching on Twitch and had their Warframe account linked to their Twitch account got an in-game item, and there was a drop table, and so there was like common items like fireworks, which is what most people got. And then all the way up to like deluxe skins and rare weapons and color packs and things like that. So people were really excited about this. And it was the first time I think a game had implemented this drop system. I know this because I was talking to some people at TwitchCon, some of the people who worked on the Twitch drop system. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, do you know about Twitch drops? I'm like, I'm a Warframe streamer. I know all about Twitch drops. And they're like, oh my God. So they were telling me a little bit about how their perspective was, and looking at their data. They had said that the audience, I think it was the audience participation or something like that for Warframe streams, went up by 100 times. And the guy was like, I don't believe this. And he had to like double check his data, and he was like, wow, like it is. And the results was that the Warframe directory got onto the top of Twitch. It was in like the top 3 at one point, right there with like League of Legends and PUBG and stuff. So it was a big boom to Warframe. And like a personal boom to my channel and all the other partners as well. But also like, along with, I guess, the good things comes the kind of sketchy things. And so basically a week after the event started, all these other streamers started coming along, and some Warframe partners, where essentially what they would do is they would speedrun achievements. And so they would make new accounts, link them to the Twitch account, play the first bit of the game to get the quick achievements, and then delete the account, make a new account, link it with Twitch, and do that over and over again. And there was a few people that were doing these 24-hour streams with like 15,000 people watching, and actually what happened is that they had to end the event early because to get the items you got in-game mail, and the in-game mail essentially was destroying their servers alone, like the
God.
amount of mail. So they had to end it early. And, it was an experiment, but it was a lesson learned, and some people in the community weren't happy about the fact that people were speedrunning achievements, and that was kind of like the spotlight on the game was like like, because it reached the top, and normally Warframe kind of sits in the middle of the road. And people were concerned that, like, they're coming in, looking at Twitch streams for Warframe, and all they saw were speedman Cheeves. I'm going to just stick with that one. Speedman Cheevies. And people were concerned about people getting turned off from the game or stealing views and all sorts of stuff. So it was quite a dramatic hit to the community. And so it'll be interesting to see what these streamers do now after the event has ended. But it was an interesting thing that's never been done before, and I hope more games take lessons from this and maybe refine it a little bit.
It's interesting. I'd like to see how they could make it work, because I understand the idea is basically it's a way to market the game, right? Like, the idea is you're giving away free content to people who are watching people on Twitch to come back to the game, pick up their item, do whatever. But like you pointed out, gamification is so ripe for exploitation on both sides, right? Like, it's really, really open for exploitation by gaming the system when you have things like... this sounds like basically the Twitch version of achievement farms that TF2 had way back in the day, where back when you would have to complete a certain number of achievements to get the new weapons in TF2. This was way back when they first started doing new weapons, and people would literally build levels designed to allow you to get the achievements to unlock all the weapons, and people would just rush to do that, which is where Valve ultimately ended up on a random drop system.
And then even with that, you would just get idling servers where people would log in while they're not doing anything and just sit there.
Right. You always have to be designing against people who are there just to get the end goal of the gamified system, the extrinsic reward, rather than the intrinsic reward of engaging with the system. Because I get what they're going for, right? Like, what they want is streamers are playing the game and they're trying to share that experience with their audience, and having these in Twitch stream drops means that, like, I did it, I got the Chivo, and then when I got the Chivo, everyone watching me got a little packet of fun, and yay, it makes watching someone do a thing that much more engaging and that much more worth my time, because if he does this, not only does he do this cool thing, and the whole room can cheer, but then I get a free thing. It's like, somebody buying everybody a round of beers at the pub when somebody scores a touchdown. Not that that ever really happens, but something like that. So I get the feeling they're going for. But I don't know. It's really open to exploitation on the player side, but then it's also really open to exploitation by less scrupulous people than the Warframe developers, where this seems to be coming from a very earnest perspective. There are ways to abuse gamification by people who hold platforms and by people who are designing these games for less positive ways. So I'd also be wary of that. But that said, this sounds like a really cool experiment, and I hope they figure out how to make it work for Warframe. Certainly seem to help in the short term.
Oh, for sure. Like, it's definitely been the most successful campaign that they've ever done yet. And the directory is kind of back where it is now, but it did bring up a lot of conflict in the community side, and it's interesting because the Warframe partners have their own Discord where the community managers all hang out, and they pretty much talk to us all the time. But they kind of stayed silent about some of the issues, and that was kind of concerning, and it turned into Twitter fights and people subtweeting each other, and it's like, it became really toxic. And normally Warframe's pretty good about not being toxic, mostly because it is like a PvE loot grind game, so, no one has to shit on anyone else, but there's these little, it really does become this kind of like our territory versus like their territory when it comes to Twitch directories of like smaller communities. And like the outsiders came in and they reached out to some bigger streamers to start playing Warframe and kind of accelerated their status. So they got glyphs right away, which is like normally something for partners. And they got all the Eidolon content early, or like the information early with the partners. And they're, so like there's that like marketing versus like community element that I think I'm very interested in exploring more as I look into these like game-based Twitch partner communities outside of like the regular Twitch partner.
It'll be interesting to see it grow, and I think it will only grow, especially, I mean, YouTube is interested in streaming services, obviously, and there have been Twitch competitors for a while, although at this point I don't know if anybody other than YouTube really has the finances to do it. Who was it that bought Twitch? Was it Amazon, or was it eBay? Who bought Twitch?
Amazon.
It was Amazon. Okay, yeah, they have the money to keep the lights on at Twitch. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if this gets like adopted by other streaming services like the YouTube streaming stuff. Anyway, Josh, you've been, unless anybody has anything else to talk about Eidolon?
Did you meet any Greek ghosts?
Is that what an Eidolon is?
That's what an Eidolon is. It's the like ancient Greek idea of ghosts, basically.
Like dead people ghosts, or sort of
like
spirits,
like
or
the image of a spirit of a dead person that someone sees.
Well, the Eidolons in Warframe are just like Shadow of the Colossus things, so probably not.
Oh.
Maybe there's lore there, I don't know about it.
Is the plural of Eidolon Eidolon? Because it's the plains of Eidolon, which makes it sound like it's one dude's plains. But are they all Eidolons?
Wikipedia is telling me that the plural of Eidolon is either Eidolons or Idola.
Idola sounds cooler. The plains of
Yeah, that does
Idola,
sound
and
pretty
it's
cool.
full of ghosts. Yeah.
The Eidolons
Full of
only come out at
ghosts
night,
of
though.
failed fashion frames.
Haha!
So they come out at night, and they're like the Shadow of the Colossus monsters?
Well, they're like very large, like slow moving, and you have to. It's like a kind of like a boss battle, like a raid boss. So you don't have to like climb up on them, but you have to like take out their limbs and like get these things called lures to like hold them in place so they don't teleport away. We summon little smaller ghost things.
I'm still hung up on the name. Like, it'd be like calling something the Plains of Ghost. And you have ghosts, plural, but why don't you call it the Plains of Ghosts? I don't know.
It's Greek. Greek sounds cool.
It does sound cool.
I should point out, I'm not a classicist. The only reason I know what Eidolon is because I looked it up for another game called Eidolon, which was like released a couple years back and was actually probably a bit better, more appropriately named anyway, because it was about wandering around like post-apocalypse Washington, where like everything had recovered and nature had recovered from the post-apocalypse, and like basically seeing cyber ghosts of people who died and like learning their stories.
I want to be a cyber ghost when I grow up.
Like it was like, I guess the conceit was like their recording devices or whatever. You would find those and see apparitions of them and that kind of thing.
I really shouldn't be so picky because the emphasis is really on the plains, because this is a game that used to mostly be inside, and suddenly now you can go outside and fight giant Shadow of the Colossi things. So I think my emphasis is wrong.
Well, it's kind of bugging me now too, actually. But it's a pretty cool expansion. They're going to be doing more open world maps because this was the Earth map, and there's different planets you can go on in Warframe. So they're going to be developing another open world map on another planet. So people really want to see an ice planet. That'd be pretty cool. Might happen.
So what is the open world content like? Is it like Destiny, where it's just sort of a bunch of players together with missions spread out through the open world, or like is it an instance where you have to go there and do a thing with friends, and it's just you and your friends?
It's instanced. So there's a town, and you go to the town and you can get different supplies, and then there's a guy that has bounties, and then you go into the plains with a party of 4, just like any other Warframe map. And it's just open world, and so like there's the bounty that you have selected, and then once you're done the bounty, you can fish, or mine, or if it's an Eidolon, if it's night, you can fight an Eidolon. And then sometimes other small bounties pop up randomly. But for the most part, you're still very much like going into the plains with a party of 4 or by yourself, either farming or doing missions, and then going back to the town to exchange your stuff. The one thing I have a problem with is that it doesn't actually contribute much to the rest of the game. So like you farm fish to get resources, to get standing for the different factions there, to get better fishing rods, to fish better, to mine better, to like, you know, upgrade weapons that you can use to kill Eidolons. And there's some like mods and stuff you can use for your frames that are just, you could just use anywhere. But for the most part, it's very like, what's the term I'm thinking of? Like it's separate from the game in a way because it only really helps improve itself. What am I thinking of? What's the term?
I feel like there's a word for that, but I don't know what it is.
I don't know either, but it reminds me of Star Wars Galaxies, where you had like the Star Wars Galaxies game that was basically like EverQuest-ish, and then like I don't remember exactly how long later, but like within the first year, they released the expansion that added space. And space was cool and all, but it had absolutely, there was zero overlap with like ground stuff. You had a completely different skill tree. It only added one crafting profession, and that crafting profession was just like only for space stuff, so there wasn't any real like economy overlap or anything. Space rewards didn't help you on the ground, and ground rewards didn't help you in space, and so on.
So according to Warframe Wiki, the Eidolons are the sentient that were defeated in a battle against the Tenno in an ancient war and now wander aimlessly in the fields devoid of purpose. So it is kind of a ghost. You're right.
Sounds more like Titans, though.
Well,
like,
anyways,
if we're going for classical Greek ideas, like that does sound more like the Greek Titans. I suppose that you can't go Plains of Titans without running into a lot of like, oh, it's Attack on Titan. Where's the naked people? Where's the giant mecha?
Everything in the game is really based off of like Greek mythology, and like there's a Warframe named Nyx, and there's one named I don't know, I can't think of any others right off the bat. There's like all the planet names, right, are all Greek inspired for the most part.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Hi, Chris.
I'm back. All right. Do we want to? Were you guys in the middle of something? Sorry, my internet
we can probably switch gears.
Just plotting your demise.
That too.
Okay.
We weren't gonna tell him, Josh. God.
All right. Are we moving on?
It's better that he knows. Just trust me. It'll eat at him.
I lost the last bit of the conversation. Do we want to keep going on that, or do we want to? Are we ready to move on?
No, we're good. We can move on.
All right. Sorry again. My internet sucks.
That's
So
not
Josh,
usually an attribute I attribute to you. Wow, I really fucked that up. An attribute I attribute to you. Great going, Josh. I was going to make a joke at Rutskarn's expense, but I guess I'm going to abandon that.
So speaking of streamy adventure times on Twitch, I am to understand that you and Alex streamed some Assassin's Creed yesterday?
Yeah, we said we were going to stream the least popular game that came out last week. Or is it the week before last week now? I mean, like, think of what came out last week. Like, Mario Odyssey, Destiny 2 is probably more popular than it at this point.
What about the game by the guys that did Until Dawn? That came out last week, too.
Oh, A Hidden Agenda. I played that.
Yes.
Did it?
Yeah, Hidden Agenda came out. I have not messed with...
I didn't realize that was also coming out.
So yeah. Well, that's why I think that is the least popular game that came out, at least in terms of fairly sizable releases.
Okay, fine.
But anyway, so I'm interested in playing that, but I don't... To stay on topic, so you guys played Assassin's Creed Origins. Did you have any major historical concerns, complaints, issues?
No, it seemed pretty good.
You were a little bothered by Alexandria. It seemed.
Were we?
I don't know. You seemed to say that you didn't. It was not right.
No, did I? I thought I said that it was like this was what you would expect because Alexandria was a Greek city and not an Egyptian city at all. So having all this like classical Greek kind of stuff. No, I think it's really cool as far as like being about ancient Egypt and having ancient Egyptian culture and mythology and architecture and so on. That all looks cool. I think the thing that I said was like, it's weird that we're just in the middle of the desert now that you can get from the Siwa Oasis to the Nile in a quick hop and a skip.
That's video game though. Like that's any open world game plays with size and scale. Skyrim does that. All the Bethesda games do that.
Like, I guess, like, after Alexander got lost in the desert for a while and lost a bunch of people to, like, starvation and dehydration.
You just didn't look left and see the city. Oh, shit. I should have just done that. God. So there's nothing really historically wrong with it, you think? Like, it's fairly time period accurate?
I mean, beyond like the typical Assassin's Creed conceits that you're going to see in every Assassin's Creed game, where like everyone who was anyone in history seems to have had the advantage of having alien technology on their side, and or is a Templar.
I've long maintained it's sort of the Forrest Gump of video game franchises, where you just bump into every important historical figure ever.
Like if you're gonna do that though, like the age of Caesar and Cleopatra in Egypt is probably the best time to do it, where it won't seem weird, because like there's a whole bunch of like very famous historical figures running around during the time period of the game. The story is still kind of from the looks of it, very melodramatic, and like it seems like they're kind of trying to do Assassin's Creed 2 again, where the initial story is all about revenge, because
that was
killed your family members.
That's the one thing that did kind of bug me, is not only is it a classic Ubisoft revenge story of we can excuse whatever actions you take in the game because some people died, which is like every Ubisoft open world game ever, even the stupid racing game. Anyway, sorry, I get angry about that still.
Like I don't know, like if we want to spoil like specifically what happens in this game, it's only like an hour and a half in, so like who cares?
But that was my other complaint.
It's kind of the premise.
That's true. But like my complaint is I've only played like, I haven't got quite to the reveal yet, but I played like an hour, and that opening hour of Origins is really super confusing because it opens in media res with you killing one of the guys that you're getting revenge on, but you don't know what happened and why you're going after him for revenge.
Yeah.
It's actually worse than that, because like there's that cutscene
with the Pharaoh. Yeah, it's like you see the Pharaoh and you glare at him.
Okay, so there's a cutscene with Ptolemy the 13th, and then you it cuts, and then you're in a dark place, and it says the Vent Pyramid, and you're fighting some dude with a mask, and you kill him, or like kind of kill him off screen, I guess. And then it cuts again, and you're fighting some like 8-foot tall dude with a big hammer, and the idea like that you think is happening is that the 8-foot dude with the big hammer is like coming after you like as the bodyguard for the guy you just literally killed in the last cutscene, and that all like is happening sequentially. That's not the case, because you're no longer at the Bent Pyramid. You're in some temple complex hundreds of miles away in the Siwa Oasis, and like apparently that all just like, so you've got like that a year ago you scowl at the Pharaoh, then you kill some dude, then sometime later you're fighting some giant guy with a hammer in some ruins. And like none of it makes a whole lot of like it's even worse than it looks as far as trying to work out what's going on.
And eventually they do fill in the backstory, but for the first hour, you are just completely lost as to what is actually really happening, and it's not a great way to start your big new reboot of the franchise, or not reboot, but I don't know. They took a year off.
The start of that game is not great, which is strange for video games, because if there's anything that video games do generally pretty well, it's getting the like first couple hours experience good.
It was very boring.
But like the thing they did is they kind of threw out all the Assassin's Creed gameplay like elements. Like there's a little bit you can jump off of people and stab them with your blade, your hidden blade that you get like 2 hours into the game. Sure, good. But like most of the gameplay now feels very Witcher 3 or Horizon Zero Dawn, somewhere in between there. Like this game is actually a little bit more hard RPG than Horizon Zero Dawn was. Like there's a level system that's very important, like almost MMO levels of importance. So you get dumped into your hometown, I guess, and it's this oasis that's kind of off away from the main game world, and you're level 2, and the next quest, like the next story quest, you're told is level 5, and it literally just says, hey, you're not going to be able to do this quest, go level up first. And so you go and do side quests for like an hour or two. And then you go and do the level 5 mission. And we kind of tested this later on to see like what would happen. Like we were level 8 and we tried to do a level 11 mission. So 3 levels higher. And like we could take on individual enemies and beat them taking some amount of damage. But like more than 2 or 3 enemies was like instant death. So the whole thing is like you get that initial opening cutscene, and then you land in the first open world area, and then it's straight up just like, hey, go level up, go do some side quests and grind up your level. And the side quests are not that great. They're pretty standard fare, what you would expect from like side quests, like one of the village kids got stuck in a tomb and you gotta go and do a little bit of puzzle, like very light puzzle solving involving hitting some barrels with your sword so that they explode instantly so you can move a bookshelf to the side. And that's a side quest. And then it ends with like fighting some hyenas and a leopard for some reason.
That's not great, but what was the last Assassin's Creed game you played?
I played a bit of Assassin's Creed Revelations, and that was the last one that I really actually did.
Yeah, that's why I think you might be a little bit underwhelmed here. Like the series had fallen into a pretty hardcore rut, I think, by the time you reached like Unity.
Like I was kind of done with Assassin's Creed around like 2/3 of the way through Brotherhood. So I got Revelations, which is sort of like the third Ezio story, the end of the Ezio story, and it was just like, I'm not interested in doing this. Like, whatever. I didn't play 3. I did not play 4. I did not play Unity or Syndicate. So
it has never... The series has never played well. Like this is the quintessential problem with Assassin's Creed. It is amazingly beautiful historical fiction that recreates a real place and real history, not necessarily literally accurately. We were just complaining about the desert, but in a way that is something you don't get in a lot of other places. It's not a lot of games let you walk down the streets of revolutionary France that aren't like, you're a dude with a mega gun shooting, all sorts of guys trying to cut off their heads for the revolution. No, you're just walking down revolutionary France's back alleys, or you're walking down the street of ancient Egypt or whatever. We don't have a ton of really big budget, awesome historical fiction. So that's the one thing the game always did well, but it has never played well. And I'm interested to see if some of these combat mechanic changes and a bigger emphasis on systems makes exploring the world less unbearable, because as much as I love the world of something like Assassin's Creed Unity or Syndicate, climbing Big Ben, totally amazing thing to do in Syndicate, But like every mission was like free orphans from the child labor facility by sneaking around and walking up to an orphan and hitting A. And if that's the depth of your interaction with child labor in Victorian England, that's not a great system. You've got this beautifully rendered world, and the interaction with it is crappy. I was really hoping that taking more of a card out of, or more of a note from Far Cry or The Witcher would make it less unbearable to actually play rather than just walk around in.
Like,
Does
so
that seem
the
to be the
actual
case?
the gameplay itself is it's basically Dark Souls combat, and it's really like Dark Souls combat by way of The Witcher 3, which is already kind of doing Dark Souls combat. So you have, and it's even like got the controls laid out the same on a gamepad. So R1 is light attack, R2 is heavy attack. You've got a dodge button. You can unlock a parry at some point. Like it's pretty, you have a block button on L1. It's very very, very basically Dark Souls. It's not nearly as deep as Dark Souls or as satisfying, but it doesn't really need to be because, Dark Souls is all about that particular gameplay loop of fight enemy, use your weapon skills, dodge, block, that kind of stuff. And this game has more to it than that. So, I'm not bothered by a game that is not just trying to be Dark Souls, having Dark Souls combat, but not as deep. So, that's more fun than they ever got with their old combat system, which was basically just like a parry counter system. You just look at enemies and wait for them to hit you, and then you'd block at the right second and then instantly kill them. And that was basically the best way to play through Assassin's Creed 2. I guess I'd heard that they had added more options there, but in subsequent games that I didn't play, but that was sort of the bread and butter of Assassin's Creed combat. And there weren't really any stealth mechanics in the old Assassin's Creed that much. Despite being a game about assassins, there were surprisingly few mechanics about hiding, aside from just sit on a bench with some other random people and now they magically can't see you.
Yeah, well.
You should definitely tell Chris about the funnest moment we had in the game, though. And you know which one it is.
There are several ones that come to mind. One of them is when we rammed that galley with our tiny boat and pushed back a trireme, basically, like a Greek trireme with this tiny barge with some drunk dude we didn't like on it and left him there.
Yeah, we were supposed to bring him back to his wife, but he was a drunk asshole, so we decided not to. And we just left him in the middle of the ocean.
Did you swim back?
Yeah.
Awesome.
We rescued him from crocodiles, and then we told him we're taking him back to his wife, and he was like, I have a wife, and was talking about a bunch of drunken antics, and we were just like, okay, let's just leave this guy in the middle of the lake, and he can deal with himself if he ever recovers.
So, Alex, what did you think?
So, this was my first time even seeing any footage from an Assassin's Creed game. I've never played one. I've never even seen anyone play one. And I've seen maybe a bit of the one where you're in colonialist America, I think, and you're a slave and you're killing all the people in the plantation.
Oh, the only one that had a female protagonist.
Freedom Cry, I think, or Liberation. It's one of the two.
Liberation.
Okay, so that I've seen that because someone did a presentation on it, and we're talking about, I don't know. Anyways, they were just talking about how violent it is and how violence was it was a dissonance thing with the slave narrative that they were trying to tell, and I don't know. Anyways. So I was very underwhelmed, and I just am wondering why people are obsessed with this series. And I was saying on the stream that like I understand the appeal of exploring a historical setting in a very specific time and place, but I just feel like I don't know. I feel like there's other games that kind of give you enough of that history without all the like weird sci-fi shit and the
Oh yeah, that's back.
Sorry to spoil it for you, Chris. I forgot that it was like a reveal, but it's still pretty general. Generally, I'm talking about the sci-fi shit, and and there's so much like talking and just about nonsense. So I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either.
Like, even I can't really answer that question. Why do people like the Assassin's Creed games? And I'm like, they don't, do they? Like, did anyone like Syndicate all that much? Did anyone like Unity all that much? I don't know. I think, like, up through Assassin's Creed 3, at least, you could make the argument that, like, they had that meta-narrative and it seemed like they were building up to somewhere, but then they didn't, from what I hear, so
No,
what kept people
they
playing?
did not. They did not do good with that meta narrative, and then they kept carrying it forward, and it became a fourth wall meta commentary on video game development, and just everything about it is awful. Desmond is awful. All of it is awful. Yeah, I really don't get the Assassin's Creed thing. Like I said, I like playing it for walking around in these historical contexts, but it has never played well, ever. It introduced free running, and that's probably, like, if there's a reason to remember Assassin's Creed, really, it's that it introduced sort of, like, hold the button down free running that sort of got really, really refined in something like an Uncharted. And it introduced that mechanic the way Gears of War introduced cover shooting and then kind of flared out. That's kind of it.
And I mean, it does have that, like, that interesting veneer of, like, you are exploring an historical setting that never shows up in games like this. Which was kind of the thing that bothered me about the later series, was like it was kind of going into territory that was like, yeah, we actually do have games that are kind of set in these time periods a bit. You know, everybody was like, do Assassin's Creed World War II. And it's like, no, don't do that. Do not ever do that.
Could you imagine?
That's also, like, that's just Sniper Elite. I mean, if you want to get your murder Hitler stuff on, go just shoot Hitler in the balls with a sniper rifle in Sniper Elite. Any of the versions have it. And I guess, like, there was, like, the other, like, Assassin's Creed game that was really popular in recent, like, at times was, like, Black Flag, but that was because it was basically Sid Meier's Pirates 2, not because it was an Assassin's Creed game, and it leaned really far away from, like, that you have to assassinate people because you're a sad dude.
It also had perhaps the best the best actual arc, in that basically, instead of having the arc of everybody died and so I'm out for revenge, the arc was you're a young pirate who's kind of a jackass, and then you go set sail and pretend like you're an assassin even though you're not, and you're halfway good at it, so, like, you can kind of make it work until it doesn't work and everything falls apart and you lose everything, and then having lost everything, have to redeem yourself and prove yourself actually good, and, like, that's an actual character arc, as opposed to a very boring vengeance story, which is about what 90% of Ubisoft games are.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've talked about we've pooped on Assassin's Creed enough, I think, for one podcast. Oh, you had something?
I want to just add one other anecdote from the stream, which is that, like yes, they do have that sci-fi story. Like, the game doesn't start out with any, like, Abstergo nonsense, but, like, after the first major assassination happens, like, the Animus shuts off and you pop out into the real world and you're in some desert cave as a lady, and everyone watching the stream just kind of groaned in unison. There was just, like, everybody's yelling no in the chat, and it was great.
Future stuff is so bad.
It's doing that again. And it was literally like pop out so you can read documents, and we were like, fuck that.
Yeah, like it was
Immediately went
literally
back
like
in.
this interface of this lady's laptop, and it had this weird fake band on it, and I'm like, I don't care. This isn't her story.
Like the one positive is like, hey, you're playing a lady instead of the most boring man on the planet now, and also like maybe she's got a girlfriend, but like, come on, Ubisoft, if you want to have a female protagonist, just make the fucking assassin a female. Like,
They've done in the
yeah, once on the
2D
PSP game.
No, they did it. They did it on the PSP game, and then I think one of the assassins in the 2D stealth games was a woman. I think.
Oh, those games that everyone played and liked.
Anyway, again, I
Feels
think
like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
we have made Ubisoft feel shame enough for their Assassin's Creed stuff. Alex, you have been playing Fortnite, I take it?
Yeah, so I jumped back into Fortnite because I kept getting emails about it, and they have the new Battle Royale. No, I'm not even kidding you. And Dauntless tried that too, but I am not going back. It will not take me back with their nonsense. But I was playing the Battle Royale mode, which is a new free-to-play mode that they have added to the game. So you can still... they have it in separate menus, so you can get into your PvE with the tower defense, and that's all still there. But now we have a PUBG clone, and... like, I don't say PUBG clone super lightly, but it really is a kind of rip-off of the whole thing. Right down to the whole, like, you're in a airborne vehicle, and you have to parachute down, and, like, except it's the bus. I don't know. There's a bus.
Is there a blue wall?
Yes, there is the blue wall. So the circle that, the main difference is that I think the map is smaller and you get less equipment, so there's less foraging time and more fighting time. So in my experience, I landed somewhere, a few other people were there, you quickly grabbed a gun, which was usually a shotgun or an assault rifle, and the shooting started right away. And if people were hiding, then you can also use the build mechanic in that, so you can build like a staircase up to the second floor of a building. You can maybe pick up traps every once in a while, which is kind of neat. The same traps from the tower defense version. So I had at one point like a Tesla coil on the roof of this house I was in, and tried to lure people into it, but no one fell into it. So, or one time someone like broke through a wall to get me, and that was kind of fun.
Like PUBG, but you can make your own fortifications sounds like an interesting way to do it, and probably the best way that you could do it with Fortnite's existing mechanics.
But you already know, like, the pre-built maps are always going to look different than the player-made structures. So it's going to be real hard to like other than playing mind games, like literally building yourself a fort next to a fully furnished home and then hiding in the home and assuming that people will look for you inside the fort because they know that a player built it. It's hard to build a house and hide in it because people are going to be walking around and go, oh, look, a player built that fortress. Let's kill the player inside that.
I mean, that is exactly the sort of mind game shit that people would play in PUBG, so... But even if it's just like reinforce the existing structure that you're in, like that, like there are times there are situations when you're playing PUBG where like the jig is up and everybody already knows where you are, and for various reasons they can't get to you easily, but they're laying down fire, and you're like, it would be really cool if I could make this window go away.
So I will admit that I have not got into the late game element. So I have made it to 40th, and I've killed one person. I've never made it to the late game where maybe there's a change and people are actually fortifying and building structures and things. So I didn't see a lot of that yet.
Is it still 100 versus 100? Or not 100 versus 100 versus all? Like it's 100 player servers.
Is it as fast to get into and out of a game the way it is in PUBG?
I think it's faster in PUBG.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty fast.
And I think overall, I think it has to do with the servers and the controls and everything just being a little bit more polished. Like you're not
we were
stuck in the
seeing-
menus as much. Sorry, Josh.
Wait, what? That's not... What? We're talking about Fortnite here, right?
Well, not in a series of menus, but I mean, it's not like in PUBG where like it takes forever to load in, and then sometimes it's
yeah.
laggy or like jumping works in Fortnite, which is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, like PUBG's weird latency jankiness is like tolerable if you're coming from like to it from like DayZ or any of the Arma like descended stuff where Arma itself is really fucking janky all the time, so you're kind of used to it. But like if you want to like take that and like put actual legit real decent multiplayer shooter mechanics and netcode into it, like, you know, and like MMO and like normal online shooter kind of latency, like you're gonna beat PUBG pretty fast. You know, like the jankiness is charming to an extent, but not enough to say like I really want to play this game like this all the time. Like it'd be really swell if when I click on something to loot it in PUBG, I actually did, instead of like having a second of latency between hitting that and picking it up, and sometimes not knowing if it's actually going to end up in my inventory, so I'm just spamming the F key or right clicking on it a lot.
So my weird hang up with this is that my experience with Fortnite is very driven by persistent items. Like that's the one thing that Fortnite does that's really, really kind of cool, is that it has a perpetual inventory for crafting across all of its multiplayer modes. And whether you're doing your own local thing with building your own fort, or whether you're going into another multiplayer game, your inventory is your inventory, and that's static. And from what I understand, this mode resets that because you have to be able to find items, so having items on you going in doesn't make a lot of sense. Is that true, that you just have, like, you spawn with nothing, like in PUBG?
You have your pickaxe, so you can farm right away for materials, but other than that, you don't have anything.
That's such a weird decision. I mean, I get it, because if you're trying to ape PUBG, you need to start with nothing, but so much of the game is built around backpack space and carrying capacity and crafting and carrying that inventory around all around with you. I mean, that's why they have that entire mechanic of, like, you save survivors to send off on scavenging missions to go find stuff for you, so that, you know, when you come back to play later, if they succeeded in their mission, you can have more wood or bullets or whatever. That they kind of remove all of that to compete with PUBG is just, I don't know, it's weird to me, like, that they would neglect this core thing they built all these menus around to facilitate competing with another game.
I mean, like, lots of people really hated that about Fortnite, so maybe it's not a bad thing. Like, it's totally separate. Like, this game mode is totally separate from the normal progression, though, isn't it? Like, you don't
Yeah, it's
get
completely
stuff
separate.
from playing Battle Royale in
It's
your
free,
normal
right?
game stuff, and vice versa.
Yes, it's free to play, unlike the main version.
Yeah. Is there any advantage to having played the main version then? Like, do you get special
Not at
skins
all.
or stuff?
You
Okay.
get a handle of what the menus are, so the build menus, which are a little confusing at first.
Right.
I would say that I think this whole thing is just a marketing strategy. Get people in with the PUBG, and it's probably was super easy to build for them, and then just sell the rest of the game.
But is anyone still interested in the rest of Fortnite's gameplay stuff, though? Like, we kind of didn't... like, we all kind of fell off of it pretty quickly.
If they cleaned it up, if they weren't building marketing gimmicks, stealing from other games that do it better first, and they were focused on cleaning up their menus and systems, I would be interested in giving it another go in 6 months and see if they've fixed it up. I liked what I played. It was just overly convoluted, weirdly balanced, and kind of lacked focus. If they can polish it up and really focus on what they want it to be, rather than having it be a little bit of everything, I think it could be cool. The other problem is that Destiny 2 came out, and if I'm looking for, like, shootery things with a consistent inventory thing where I'm looking for cool stuff, that currently wins when I'm looking at the two games I could play.
Yeah. I guess the other question I have about it is like they were releasing player numbers and like the Fortnite Battle Royale stuff was like directly competing with PUBG's numbers, which were already like ridiculously high. You know, like PUBG is competing with like Counter-Strike and you know, and other big Steam games, you know, probably in the Overwatch realm of like player base. And I'm like that's cool and all, but I don't know anyone who's actually playing the Fortnite Battle Royale stuff. Like I guess until now that you started picking it up, Alex. So
It's really big on Twitch right now.
Yeah. I do wonder which platform they're actually playing it on, because I feel like it would be bigger on consoles because it's the free-to-play part, and right now the only place you can play it on the PC is through the Epic launcher thing, which is really weird.
Oh, God. Yeah, I forgot about that, and I was like, how do I play Fortnite? Which company does this thing? Oh, that launcher.
You can launch Fortnite and the completely fan-built, completely half-finished Unreal Tournament 2017, or Paragon, or whatever their
I actually
Dota
really
clone.
like Paragon.
oh yeah, that's right. Quake is Bethesda. I was like, wait, can't you play the new?
No, that's
oh no, it's
the
Quake.
Bethesda launcher.
That's Bethesda. You can't do that. Yeah, it's a different one. Is that still going on?
Yeah, the Quake
Yeah, what
Champions came
happened?
out.
They keep. Oh, did that? Did it? They keep
Yeah.
sending me like emails about like alpha questionnaires, and I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's $30 on Steam right now. It came out.
Huh.
It's in early access, but it came out on Steam. I mean, it came out.
Oh, okay.
It
So
came out on
like
Steam.
they went from closed alpha to paid open beta, is what you're
Yes.
saying.
Do you want to talk about? We want to move on. Anybody got anything else to say about Fortnite?
Should we do a stream of it at some point or something?
Fortnite
Yeah,
or
why
Quake
not?
Champions?
Both. And the fighting game.
Either.
And a fighting game.
That's something else we got to figure out. Yeah, I mentioned this on the stream, but we want to do a stream where, like, I suck at fighting games, right? That's our premise. And wouldn't it be interesting to watch me struggle at learning how to play fighting games live with a live audience? So
I've seen you struggle. You swear and get angry, and it's scary.
That's great.
I
Hang
would
out.
vote.
Bring your kids.
I would vote for Killer Instinct, just because that's a fighting game I like, and since I don't think we're going to do Injustice 2.
I think we were talking about something like more classic, like, I don't know, one of the Street Fighters, or maybe like Tekken or Mortal Kombat.
I can't help you with that. I can't help with like 2D sprite based. It's all about frame counting, and I can't even.
Well, it would have to be like ideally we'd want to like do it multiplayer over the internet, which like again, like I understand that's not an ideal way to learn how to play a fighting game, but like it's better than learning how to play a fighting game by playing against the AI, which is just reading your inputs. So like it would have to be a more modern like Street Fighter 5 or, you know, Mortal Kombat X or newer, or something like that.
Well, I could do Mortal Kombat, but
I think that's what we had thought. Mortal Kombat X.
Yeah, because I got that and then never ended up playing it. I think I played one match against Campster, had no idea what I was doing, and Campster killed me in 2 seconds. So,
Well, we can figure that out anyway.
but if you have suggestions, tweet them at me at Cuffedbert, or, you know, send them to the Spodcast email at spoilerwarningshow@gmail.com.
How much time we got? We want to talk about your thing, Josh, or
I don't know. I haven't been keeping track. What was my thing?
your other thing was Divinity Original Sin 2, but
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a video game I've been playing this week, predominantly. And I've been playing it with Glitch, who is not here because he's busy watching some TV show that is apparently cool called like Stranger Things 2 or something. I don't know. Anyway, we should all shame him for not being here. But I've been playing Divinity Original Sin with him, and that's been really cool. I didn't really play I owned the first game, I bought it, but I bought it like after everyone else had played it. So like nobody wanted to play it with me multiplayer. I was like, oh. And it's like, I guess these games are okay single player, but like their coolest component is that you can basically play them as if you were playing like a tabletop RPG campaign with friends. And it's kind of the only game that's doing that now. Like aside from like Tabletop Simulator and whatever, that are just like actually just play D&D online with your friends. This is the only game that's doing like the Icewind Dale or like Baldur's Gate kind of thing where you can just like make your own party and have
That was a thing for a little while, right? Right around with Icewind Dale, and I think it was maybe an initiative within BioWare or whatever. Like Neverwinter Nights did similar stuff. I feel like.
Well, I mean, this was all like Interplay at the No, Interplay was Fallout. That was BioWare. What am I talking about? Sorry, continue.
Well, I was just saying, like there was this movement, like in the early 2000s, to try to make this a thing, right? Where you would release a video game, and it would be a big rules-based MMO, or not MMO, but a big rules-based RPG. But then you would also issue the authoring software to come up with your own campaigns. And
like Neverwinter Nights was probably the pinnacle of that. Where
I don't know if it ever really
Neverwinter Nights campaign was like really boring, but everybody made their own Neverwinter Nights campaigns. You can apparently do this with Divinity Original Sin 2. There is a like GM mode where you set up a campaign and just do it.
It's so in depth, and the character creator is so satisfying.
I've heard nothing but good things.
They blend the mixture of like. Because when you make characters in these RPGs, usually they're like very little backstory, but they let you customize pre-built characters. And I didn't feel like I wanted to go outside of what they had to offer, because they had some really great stories, like backstories for these characters. But then you weren't like, oh, I like this backstory, but I don't like this class. No, Divinity says, no, don't worry about it, man. You can change the class of that character, so you can pick whatever you want.
And even then, like, the classes aren't classes in the traditional sense. Like, you're not saying, I'm a mage, I can do this. There's no way for me to do this other thing that's like a warrior thing ever through the game. Like, the starting classes just, like, are just what skills you initially start with. And you can just, like, kind of spec into whatever the heck you want and do any kind of hybrid stuff. That's really cool. But yeah, like Obsidian has kind of revived the like late 90s, early 2000s BioWare 2D top-down RPG stuff, but they haven't really leaned into multiplayer stuff with that at all. So like Larian Studios is pretty much the only developer that I think is doing this kind of stuff in 2017. And they did it with their last game too, Divinity Original Sin 1. But it's pretty cool. The way the magic system works and the way things interact is really interesting. So like you can cast a spell to make it rain, right? And it rains over the battlefield and leaves a bunch of puddles of water everywhere. And then you can cast a lightning bolt into the puddles of water, and everything that's in the like connected to that, like standing in a puddle of water that's connected to that initial puddle of water, gets shocked. Or you can cast a different spell to make all that water turn into puddles of poison. And then puddles of poison are flammable, so you can just throw a fireball into that and set the entire room on fire. And there's a lot of these like area of effect field interactions that are pretty cool. And that's how you set up a lot of the like conditions and control stuff is by setting up these fields and using different combinations of spells with one another to do various different effects. And there's like you can play an undead, like you can just play a skeletal version of one of the four races, and they're like immune to poison. Like poison actually heals them, but healing spells hurt them. So if you're playing an undead, you can just like lay down a field of poison and go to town, because like just standing in the poison will heal you. But if you're fighting an undead, you can cast like the restoration spell that you would normally use to like heal a party member and heal the undead, which actually does a whole bunch of damage to them.
That's
like there's a lot of like cool role-playing mechanics in it. Like it's deeper than your typical RPG in that way. There's a lot of like weird, cool role-playing stuff you can do with it.
I feel like the Tyranny and Pillars of Eternity team are doing more of a Baldur's Gate narrative focus, and the team working on Divinity Original Sin is more interested in recreating combat encounters from your childhood of playing D&D or whatever. Not that there isn't role-playing, there's lots of that, but the emphasis is more on systems than on storytelling, at least a little bit, at least mechanically. Whereas I think something like Tyranny did not care a lot about combat, at least not as much as telling you the story of John Tyranny and his quest for vengeance or whatever.
You have perfectly described the story of Tyranny.
I didn't want to summarize everything. I thought for 5 seconds about summarizing that entire narrative, and I'm like, nope, I'm just not even going to do that.
Yeah, it very much feels like that, and the game focus kind of reflects that, where like the best parts of Divinity Original Sin are getting into interesting fights, I think, and the story is not bad, but it's not like stand out from what I've seen so far. Like it can be kind of generic.
Well, from what I've understood, from what I've heard, the writing isn't bad. Like character dialogue works, characters are motivated, and the story is it's just not as interested in narrative player choice the way like Tyranny is. Tyranny is like choose the fate of the world, and we will branch off the narrative, and there's going to be combat bits, but really it's about choosing your way through the story. Whereas and again, I haven't played through Divinity, but from what I've heard, it sounds much more interested in the story is pretty linear, it's pretty well written, there's lots of good dialogue, but really you're playing this to get into hilarious combat scenarios that you can like creatively solve your way out of. It almost kind of sounds like Fallout. The more I hear about it, actually, the original Fallout, not in tone, but just in what it's about.
Yeah, and the combat is much more similar to Fallout than it is to Baldur's Gate. Like it's turn-based, and like you have action points, and like some skills take more action points than others, and that kind of thing. And you know, if you're wearing light armor, you can take more, you can move further before that consumes like another action point and that kind of thing. So, it's closer to Fallout, I feel like, than to Baldur's Gate in a lot of ways. And as far as like the story stuff goes, like, so there's this major antagonist of like the first act is this holy man bishop, and the final thing is like the final battle of that act is you fight him, and I blew him up and then raised a minion out of his flesh for the rest of the fight, and then I got onto a ship and they were like, hey, so that dude you killed is here. I was like, what? Yeah, no, he's fine. He's just unconscious. And it's like, but I blew him up and turned him into an undead minion. I'm pretty sure he's not okay. And I don't know, maybe that's like a ruse and it's some other character, or the original one was a decoy or something. I don't know. I haven't gotten past that part yet, but like that was kind of the reaction of like, oh, okay, we need this guy alive for some reason. We don't have a way to capture people. So we're just gonna make it so that regardless of how much you killed that dude, he's just here now. So that's cool.
The undead are actually really cool in that game because they have to wear, well, they're like skeletons, and they have to
Right.
wear the skin of another to, blend in, which is really neat because your character
Yeah.
actually does that, like changes
Wait.
form as you walk in the town.
Where do they get the skin? Like, do you have to murder somebody?
Well, there's one undead who keeps trying to take people's faces without much success because he doesn't understand how faces work. But like in general, like the undead have to hide their features from people with like hoods or masks or whatever, or people freak the fuck out.
As they probably should.
Yeah, that's understandable.
And the elves are really cool because they eat flesh and will get the memories
they're
of that
cannibals.
person.
Wait,
And
get the
that you
memories of
actually or like you can get story elements from eating somebody because you then know
you get like a
about
glimpse
them.
of their memories. Usually their final moments for some reason.
But you actually have to kill people and eat them.
Well, but then that doesn't help if they're just going to tell me how I just killed them.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's a simple thing like a password or maybe not a password, like a hint or something. But sometimes you just find corpses, so then you can get their memories and maybe get an understanding of what happened in that situation.
Elves are also by far the best race in the game as far as like, well, aside from maybe undead, as far as like combat min-maxing, because they just get an ability that straight up gives them an extra action point for a turn. And that's really important because there aren't a whole lot of abilities that do that. They're also tree people, which is interesting.
Are they playable?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Like Ents?
But like they kind of look like if they have no clothes on, they kind of look like plant-ish. Like their muscles look more like plant fiber than they do like human muscles and that kind of thing. And all their armor is very like nature-y. Anyway, it's a really cool game. There's a lot of like flavor stuff in it. I'm not sure I'd say the story itself is that interesting, but like there's a lot of other stuff in it besides just the overall narrative that are really cool.
It sounds like it's doing some neat stuff with sort of fantasy tropes. None of them sounded like, dwarf who digs for gold underground, elf who practices magic, humans who are kind of good at everything. Halfling who's good at thieving and quiet stuff. This sounds there's like cannibalistic elves and undead that have to hide themselves because they're freakish and also get hurt from healing spells, and tree people that apparently can get naked and fibrous. So it sounds interesting. How are we doing on time? You think we're about out, or?
I think we've been doing this for about an hour. Do I want to answer like questions? Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
I have a bunch of stuff, but I don't want to list it because I'm afraid if I list it and then we only do like one thing, everyone's going to get mad I didn't do the other 4 things. Let's just do emails.
No one knew that there were 4 other things.
Are you going to edit this?
No.
Oh, then there's your answer.
Let's see what we got here. Do you want to answer this one specifically at you, Chris, real quick?
Well, that sounds scary, but okay.
Okay. Dear Christopher, what do you think about Scott Pilgrim, the comic, the game, the movie, the man? Love, Christopher.
Oh, that's hard because I've only skimmed the comic and I've seen the movie and I have not actually played the game. The game is very pretty. I like the pixel art. I like the soundtrack. Was that done by Anamataguchi or whatever? Like the
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that band. I love that. It's fantastic soundtrack. But other than that, I haven't played it, so I can't really comment on how that game plays or story or anything. Um, I kind of can't stand the movie version of Scott Pilgrim. I really, really don't like him. I don't like anything about that movie, really. I like that it has a weird attempt at sort of being about game stuff, but it's this sort of dude wearing a Zelda t-shirt version of all the things it's referencing.
That's such a good metaphor.
These are not deep cuts. They're Street Fighter references, and like, you know, at the I guess spoilers to some extent, but you know, at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when Peter Quill turns into a giant Pac-Man, that cringe moment is what I feel for most of that film.
Wasn't that horrible? I completely forgot that happened.
Yeah, I had purged that from my mind.
I saw the whole of Pixels.
Oh my god!
I've been to hell and back.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Anyway, I don't like the movie. I don't like how it ends. I don't like the weird setup of all that stuff. I like the comic book, having not read it deeply, so I can't really like confirm my suspicions. But a friend was reading it, and I've skimmed through the book, and it seems like it treats Scott Pilgrim with a little bit more contempt. Like he actually needs to grow up, and that's his journey throughout the story. Whereas that's not really what happens in the film. So I guess that's my overall take on Scott Pilgrim. I would probably like the book if I read it. Did not like the film. The video game is probably awesome, and it has a great soundtrack.
Cool. Let's move on to another question. Dear Spodcast, a friend of yours has just made something in their creative field like a game, a book, a video, or a piece of music. They ask you for your opinion on it. You secretly think it's terrible. Do you, 1, lie through your teeth to be nice, it's not very convincing, you're a bad liar. 2, tell them the rude and unhelpful truth. 3, change the subject. 4, do extensive exercises, meditation, and self-reflection to change into a nicer person and learn to love whatever crap your friends make from now on. Or 5, flee without a word. Love, Christopher. Again. So I have an answer to this. I think like I've come up with a really good and solid system for dealing with this, where I say it's really great, but then I tell them that I showed my friend Campster their stuff, and Campster thinks it's really awful. And that's especially fun to do when the person asking for your feedback on stuff is Campster. So Campster, shows me a video, and I'm like, I think it's great, but I showed it to my friend Campster, and he thinks it's awful.
I don't know if I have a strikingly great answer for this question. Alex,
I have an answer. Yes, and I'm coming from an education perspective. Is that when you're saying, there's a constructive feedback to be given, in a way. The one problem you run into is if you're in completely different fields or whatever, and you don't entirely understand what's good and what's bad. Like with art, it's especially difficult because it's so out there, and I don't know anything about art or what technically makes good art. And really, I don't have any opinion about games either. I usually deal with writing and narrative, so in that case, I would there's no point in saying something is good or bad because that's not helpful, in my opinion. It's always good to tell them what you thought about it or how it made you feel, or if it does need work, ask them a question about it. So sometimes I'll say things like, what did you mean when you said this? Do I sound like it's like a teacher thing to say, or what were you trying to convey when you did this, or what were you what was this mechanic inspired by, if it was a game or something like that. Maybe I'm taking this question a little too seriously, but it's coming from that perspective of that's kind of my job,
Yeah, I think that's like a fair way to do it. Like, that's like pretty much my answer if I'm going to be actually serious about this and not just making jokes at Campster's expense. Um, like, usually when people ask you for your feedback, like, well, okay, there's like different ways that this can come up. Like, if it's just like, hey, I did this cool thing, and it's not clear that they're asking for feedback, and you don't like it, but like there's something with it that bothers you, but it doesn't look like they're actually looking for that kind of feedback, then like you don't have to give it. Like, say, it's really cool that you did that. That's great. That's fine. But if it's something they're looking for feedback for, like, you don't want to just say this sucks. Like, if they're looking for feedback to help them get better, then you want to remain constructive. So if there's something that's bothering you about it, you want to kind of like get at that from a constructive standpoint. Like, hey, so this is interesting. Why did you do it this way? That kind of thing. Just telling someone to their face, like, this sucks, I don't like it, like, that's never helpful. So, like, and of course there is that thing of, like, if it's something that you're not at all qualified to speak on, you have no expertise with, like, then, like, unless they're specifically going to you, like, I want your feedback as someone who is not familiar with this kind of stuff, then, like, don't imagine that you're going to be able to provide helpful feedback.
But at the same time, if they're coming to you because you're an expert, like I drew a picture and I took it to my artist friend, then you have a little bit more leeway, I think, to give constructive feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you may not like it, another side of it that we haven't talked about is if you don't like it because of a political reason, or if it's like offensive, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Because some people are more comfortable talking about that kind of stuff than others. And there is a way to do it when it's your close friend or family member or something like that. And then maybe if they're strangers, not so much, but it's hard to define what, like, there could be many reasons why you don't like something, basically.
Well, yeah, this is a very broad question, but, like, in general, I think the answer is, keep in mind the context in which you are viewing it. And base your reaction on that. Because it's very, very different to be like an artist and have someone who is an aspiring artist come to you with their artwork and say, like, hey, what do you think of this? Versus, like, you having never written anything in your life and your writer friend comes and shows you something they wrote. Like, those are different contexts for things. One of them, they're actively looking for, like, your feedback from your expertise as an artist, and then the other person, like, the other situation is just like, hey, I did this cool thing. So there are times when it's more appropriate to give, like feedback that specifically gets to the heart of, like, whether or not you like something, what you think it's doing right or wrong, and there are times when that's less appropriate.
All right, we doing any more questions, or do you think that's a show?
We can do like one more. I'd like to get one that's not from Chris.
Fair point.
Do we want a funny one or an interesting question?
I defer to Alex.
I'm gonna say interesting because the last one was kind of fun.
Okay. Someone just sent a really long list of alternate podcast names, which might be fun to read out at some point, but, like, it's really, this is like 45 lines long.
Oh my goodness.
Hey guys, first time listener, long time caller. My normal question for this week is, what video game had the most emotional effect on you? For example, Eris dying in Final Fantasy VII. Thanks, P. I feel like this question is kind of like what is your favorite color question. Like, obviously not as like dumb and generic as what is your favorite color, but like the kind of question that, like, or like what is your favorite food? The kind of question where I'm like, I'm going to give a different answer on a different day.
Yeah. Because it's hard to think about every emotion that I've experienced during every game I've played.
Yeah.
Like one that often comes to mind when people ask about like emotional scenes in game is the end of Metal Gear Solid 3. That I always kind of cite as a emotional ending. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I
no one's just saying
haven't
anything.
gotten around to playing Metal Gear Solid 3, so...
Now's a good time to start doing that. With everything else that's going on.
Now that there will never be a real Metal Gear game again.
Oh. Don't remind me.
It's all over, so there's plenty of time now for you to play through the entire series.
That's... MGS5 is actually so good. People complain about Quiet being weird, but, like, it's a really good game.
The Metro games actually are pretty emotionally charged for me. Both of them, but especially the good ending of Last Light, I think was one of the best video game endings I've ever seen, and the way that game ties its themes together narratively are really, really solid. And that's the reason why I've wanted to do it on Spoiler Warning for forever. Unfortunately, I'm apparently the only person in the universe that actually played Last Light, so...
Womp womp. I'm trying to think of... Like, the question's a little misleading because it cites Eris. I still don't know what the proper pronunciation is. Which sort of slants the question towards sad time emotions. And I can only really off the top of my head point to two examples of really, really sad time emotions in games. One was the end of the first season of The Walking Dead. That got me pretty good. And the other one that I can think of that really got me was That Dragon Cancer. Those are the two that come to mind off the top of my head.
I still have not played that game. For, like, not because I am waiting to play it, but because I don't actually really want to play a game about how bad cancer is.
But
that's one of those games that's like, that sounds like a really cool game. I don't ever want to experience it.
I was bawling at the end of that game. But the question does sort of slant it towards sad times, and I feel like there are other emotions like anger.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so Dark Souls then.
No.
Thanks for the segue, Campster. So in Dark Souls...
It never made me angry. I was thinking more something like Watch Dogs, which I actively was just angry at the entire time, or BioShock Infinite, or any of those like 5 games on my hate list of games that set me off. My Guy Fieri's list of games.
If they made a video game out of Guy Fieri, would it top that list?
It would just be Watch Dogs as Guy Fieri.
So, would you be living in Dissonance Town then?
No.
Welcome to Dissonance Town.
Don't encourage Josh.
I'm Chris Fieri, and this is Dissonance Town. Well, come on in.
Oh, I'm in
We're
hell.
gonna try ourselves some emotional video games today. What we got here? We got Chris Fieri's hit list of games that he hates, right here in Dissonance Town. Okay, I'm done.
Try our Donkey
I'm the host
Kong
of
sauce.
Diners, Dissonance, and Ludo Narratives.
What kind of car do you think Chris Fieri drives? PT Cruiser?
It's a smart car, but it's still got the flames of the Camaro or whatever he drives.
Either that or some like old station wagon.
I'm struggling to think of other games that like provoked a profound emotional response.
I think of the Zelda games a lot, like especially Breath of the Wild. Seeing the land for the first time, that was pretty emotional in like a good way.
Yeah, like that first reveal that you're up on this like big plateau and you see the castle in the distance.
Yeah.
Life is Strange had a number of those moments, pretty much like one per episode. Although
Yeah,
episode
Life is
5 was
Strange.
more about being really frustrated with how everything turned out.
Life is Strange is a good example. This War of Mine can produce really interesting stories. I don't know if I ever like cried playing it, but it certainly can be depressing. It's sort of an omnipresent despair. And honestly, I've been just playing this week is Mario Odyssey, which seems to be able to really elicit a sense of joy no matter what mood I'm in. Everything about that game is so bright and cheerful. It's hard, even the things that are not bright and cheerful. It's hard to be super depressed when I'm playing that game. I don't know. It's hard to quantify your emotional response to stuff after the fact, right? Like I guess that's why we fall back to crying, because it's like, when was the last time I cried at a game? Because like, it's hard to be like, what game made you the happiest? What game made you the most angry? What game made you the most afraid? It's hard to quantify emotional response.
And it's something that like you can kind of forget as time goes on too. Like,
oh, yeah.
As the intensity wears off. Like, I'm trying to remember how I felt at the end of Firewatch. And I can't remember if I was genuinely emotionally moved or just frustrated at the way the ending went off.
Ooh, I remember another good one. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
Keep pulling out these games I haven't played.
Brothers is you need a dual stick controller to play it, but it's a
right. I mean, I know what it is, but
another game that gives me that sheer sense of joy. Weirdly enough, in addition to the Mario Odyssey, this is going to sound really weird. Saints Row 4.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
I agree with you. I totally see your reasoning why. I would pick the Katamari games as like that too.
Yes, that's a good example.
I wish they made another one. It's just the great game to just chill out and relax to, and it's nice and colorful and happy.
I'm sad we never really got a proper one released on the PC. I mean, there's the one made by, oh god, it was in the Potato Bundle. I can't remember what the dev team that made it.
I know. I think I know
like
what you're talking about.
We never got an actual Katamari game, and that on the PC, and that makes me sad.
The Wonderful End of the World.
Yes, that one. And that's cool, but it doesn't quite capture what Katamari managed to do. All right, we got anything else? Any other emotional, happy, sad, scary moments?
I think we've covered like the big ones for me.
Alex?
I think we got him.
All right, cool. Any other questions,
I know
Josh,
how
or?
we can end this question.
Okay.
Describe your emotional state as I read this question to you. Hello, Spotties. I have a question for Chris.
Ooh.
Which do you hate most? Guy Fieri, the name Spodcast, or Yarny, the cute little yarn monster? Signed, not Christopher.
Oh, that's a tough question. That's actually like, my instinct is to say Guy Fieri because I hate everything that his stupid show stands for, but apparently he's a really good guy, which sucks to admit that because I hate his show, but but he's actually apparently a good person, even if his taste in food and chefery sucks. So on the other hand, I really do hate the name Spodcast, but it's kind of a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. It's a branding decision. I don't like, it doesn't actively bother me as much as having to sit through and watch Guy Fieri. Like, spending an hour recording this podcast does not bother me as much as spending an hour watching Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. And then there's Yarny, who is just, God, do I hate that game.
Speaking of anger,
Oh, that okay, yeah. No, that game made me angry. I do not use the word pretentious lightly because people accuse me of it all the time, but that game is so pretentious and it drives me up a wall. It's this faux use of it makes me angry. Okay, I'm gonna go with Yarny for now. Right now the answer is Yarny.
So would you say that Guy Fieri is secretly the person you always wish you were?
No, we're not going back to this idea.
Chris Fieri.
Someone's gonna Photoshop this, and I'm gonna get it tweeted at me, and I'm just gonna be very upset the whole week if this happens. So let's just kill it, drop it.
You won't be upset. It'll be an honor.
What if it's Guy
your face
Fieri
on your
that
idol's
tweets it
shoulder?
at you?
Oh.
I don't think that will happen. Anyway, this has been a too long podcast by about half, so I think we're time to wrap it up.
Okay.
All right. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.